Hey guys, let us know if you have any audio issues. But we have a special guest today, Mike Lewellen. We're here live at ETHDenver, and Mike is from Open Zeppelin. And Open Zeppelin, everything I know about you guys is, here's the short of what I know. It is, you have a library of smart contracts that are not guaranteed secure, but have been tested and tried and worked through, and you guys are a trusted provider in the space. Is that correct? So that's kind of one of the things I know. I know that the guys at you guys have set up scripts for people to be able to more easily set up DAOs. So those are part of smart contracts that you have available. And that's from a consulting perspective and everything else. I don't know all the details. So let's do this first. Introduce yourself. Tell everybody listening about yourself, and then let's dive into what Open Zeppelin is, and then let's start talking about security, which, interestingly enough, had a phishing attempt on my Telegram account this morning.
Okay.
So
yeah, we can dive into that. But yeah,
great.
I'll start with myself. Was born in Dallas and raised, and so started doing crypto stuff back in around 2012. Back in the old hey, what's this Bitcoin thing? Let me run a miner on some school computers and make a little money, and then figure out what money is, and then go down the rabbit hole of what is money. So I started just doing some freelance consulting in the local area, doing basic crypto setups, and slowly that kind of evolved into a real job as the industry turned into a real industry.
Nice.
And then once I got my computer science degree, I really got into the Ethereum and smart contract development space, did some corporate consulting, worked with Toyota, Thomson Reuters, Verizon, learned how not to build private blockchains.
Or not to do it at all?
Yes. Learned that is a hard education game to talk to a lot of different executives. And,
sure.
Get into that was the blockchain not Bitcoin crowd, and they've kind of slowly come around, but it took a while. But after the last couple of engagements on that, I decided to make a change. I found Open Zeppelin was hiring, and so I joined as the first manager for their audit team in terms of project managing all the audits. And, so I got to see a little bit of everything. So that's the first thing. In addition to our library, Open Zeppelin does security audits. We look at code, we verify it's secure.
So you guys are doing full-blown audits for protocols?
Absolutely.
My apologies, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and actually, it's not surprising because everyone hears about the contracts first, but that's actually how we got into it. Someone's using our contracts, and they're like, hey, I built extra stuff on top. Can you make sure it's still secure?
Right.
Yeah, so
that's awesome.
Yeah, so we worked with a lot of big protocols. I get to see Aave and Compound, and a lot of others up close. And then after a year of doing that on the security team, we started a new team called the solutions team, which is basically just, hey, actually, perfect example, some people don't know about all the things we do. Client comes to us and say, hey, what are all the things you do, and what can you do for me?
Right.
And we sit down, we basically I like to say, we take all the Lego pieces of Open Zeppelin, we build a Lego kit, and we say, here's all the stuff you need to be secure.
Nice.
So
very nice.
So contracts, audits, and then we also have a security operations platform that has the ability to do key management, automated security operations, monitoring, kind of your little hub to respond to security threats and all the other nightmares that can come up with Web3 if you're not careful.
So as a protocol, I could come to you guys and say, hey, okay, I want to build X, or I've already built. I guess most of the time you're working with developers on a team that have the skills to actually write Solidity. You're not an outsourced dev shop building protocols.
Right. Yeah. And usually what we'll do is we do have teams that come in with that, hey, we are totally new to this. We've had banks come to us before. We're doing this new. How do we do this right? And we will usually work with implementation partners that are either already involved or sometimes we know and we bring in that will work on the Solidity side, but we say, hey, here's how you use our library. We'll audit the thing the implementation partner does. So we kind of act like a guide for both the person implementing it and the customer, or the customer implements it themselves, and we kind of try to educate on best practices.
Okay. And then do you know what was the origins of kind of how Open Zeppelin got started? Do you know?
Yes, I do. It's actually, so it started in Buenos Aires, Argentina around 2016.
Nice.
So the co-founders, first of all, were big fans of Led Zeppelin, hence the name.
Love it.
The company was actually originally called Zeppelin, and then when we released the smart contract library, that was called Open Zeppelin.
Very nice.
And so eventually we got to the point where we kept showing up to conferences, and we're like, hey, yeah, we're Zeppelin. We're like, oh, you guys are the Open Zeppelin guys, because everyone knew our library. And eventually,
that's funny.
we got tired of trying to correct people. We just went with Open Zeppelin, just rolled with it.
Was the original origins of it was they were providing consulting services, assistance with contracts, that kind of thing? What were they initially doing as a company?
Yeah, initially the smart contract library and the audits. And
Okay.
Like the co-founders had done a few other things before, in both Bitcoin and like trying to build other like kind of decentralized services, and that was kind of what stuck. And they were like, we're good at this. We had a lot of like kind of OG hackers that had worked on Ethereum from way back. And so, we just continued that practice forward, and it just kept growing. Security audit practice continues to be hot in demand. And then as we worked on it more, we also realized, hey, our clients need a little bit of help before an audit, because usually you get an audit right before you want to release your code. And sometimes they show up and the code isn't too clean and the audit doesn't look too good. And so we're like, hey, maybe we do a little more advisory pre-audit.
That's a great idea. I love that. And that makes total sense, right? Because you have people bringing you code and it's going to be a mess. If you can help them solve some of those problems in advance with the work, I mean, I'm assuming that the demand is still pretty high on the audit front.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, because there was a point there where projects were saying, yeah, we won't get an audit done for 6 months, right? So, I mean, is there a backlog for you guys right now, or has that calmed down a little bit?
It's calmed down a bit. There's still a backlog, usually around 3 months, give or take. There's sometimes it kind of ebbs and flows with the market, but there always is a backlog. And we usually hire, we've been hiring security researchers continuously. We've actually got our own fellowship program just to train new auditors. We couldn't find any, so we had to build our own.
Wow, amazing.
And so, it's been steadily growing, but the demand is still there.
Nice.
And, part of the reason we're trying to do more of the security operations stuff, like kind of the post-deployment stuff, is like when we get the audit, sometimes the client goes out and they change it. They add an upgrade, they tweak something.
Right.
But maybe that that usually validates the audit. It's like that change could introduce a bug. And so we've been trying to work on both, like, providing them security reviews continuously, but also building tools that help them secure it. So basically, like, a good example is like, monitoring for like when a DAO gets a proposal. The proposal's secretly going to say, give me all the money. And no one actually pays attention. This is like Beanstalk.
I was just going to bring up Bean.
Rough case. And so we've been working with like DAOs like Compound to say, hey, let's build you monitoring so you see the governance process end to end.
Nice.
As soon as someone files a proposal, here it is. Here's the content. We'll typically audit those proposals as well as a service. So we like both look for backdoors as well as just bugs. So higher degree of confidence for those changes. And then, just also getting more involved in DAO communities directly. Because usually we work directly with protocol teams. Compound was like the first time we actually said, no, we're going to go to the DAO directly. And
gave them a proposal?
Yeah,
nice.
We actually had to compete with Trailabits and Security, who are competitors of ours, good competitors, I'll give them that.
Right.
But it was like
that's fascinating.
I think 40 plus messages in a single forum thread of like going back and forth on the offering and the pricing and having a competitive bid on the DAO vote. It was a wild ride.
That's crazy. That's crazy. That's cool, though. I love that. I love that that's happening. On the automation front, look, I mean, I think the problem is that the attack vectors keep expanding.
Oh, yeah.
And the things that people want to do with Solidity keep growing. And the connections between composable capabilities makes that even worse. I mean, do we reach a point where 75% of the audit can be automated and the rest is manual, or is it really going to always be this manual process?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's one we've always been trying to revisit because we want to stay ahead.
Sure.
We do, like, within our audit practice, we have tooling that we use to kind of like get us started. Like, hey, run a few analyzers.
Look for common things.
Yeah, stuff that gets us started, like breadcrumbs we can like start to investigate. But we have found that like what we try to do usually with clients is say, hey, some of these tools, like, you guys could run this before an audit. You don't have to pay us to run an open source security analysis, basically run an analyzer. And so what we've typically done is try to educate clients and say, hey, kind of part of that pre-advisory, let's run the tooling first and get all that easy stuff out of the way. Because what we love for an audit is like really, really mature code that might still have bugs, but all like we don't have to like go through and report, oh, this is like a dumb error here or an obvious thing here.
Right, because they've already hit those.
Yeah. All of that's cleaned out, and we can focus on the really obscure, hard to find stuff that tooling isn't well positioned for. So I guess that's to say, I think tooling can improve the efficiency of audits, but I think keeping them like a pre-audit step is better because, frankly, if audits are expensive.
Right.
We get that all the time. We're like, guys, you keep increasing the rates, and we're like, yeah, well, it's a big market.
Welcome to capitalism.
We want to maximize that value for clients. We want to have to make them do repeat audits or increase the scope because the code's messy, it takes us longer. So we're like, yeah, the clean code you give us, we'll get more value out of trying to find obscure stuff. And like, yeah, if we don't find it, then we feel more confident because we've had the time to look.
Yeah.
In fact, the industry, all of our competitors agree. We talk on panels and we're like, yeah, everyone hates the word audit because there's no standard we're auditing against. It's a time box security assessment. That's the real definition.
Right.
And we're just, whatever time that we can book, we do our own estimate based on the code, and the client will sometimes, give or take say, yeah, it seems like enough. But, sometimes we find a lot of bugs and we're like, we're not sure we found them all. And so we'll give you the report, we'll resolve what we did find. And sometimes we have to have an awkward conversation with the client and say, hey, maybe you should get another audit after you fix all this. I know that you want to launch soon, but that might be the best practice. And so we hate having those conversations, so we can get ahead of it. That's all the better.
Is there a system? I mean, have you seen anywhere? So, I've worked with and we've advised projects, right, that are bootstrapping, and they actually, really trying to be good citizens of the ecosystem. They don't see a need for a token for their project.
Nice.
So they thus don't see a need for necessarily having a public sale of any kind or putting a token into liquidity pools or anything else to raise money. And so they go out and try to do the VC raise or the angel raise, and that's tough to do. They're out trying to get grants, whatever. Is there, I'm just wondering if the industry, all of the players in the industry have thought, is there a way that we can onboard promising protocols, right, into the audit process with maybe some stake in the particular protocol, that kind of thing? I know probably everyone comes to you guys and is like, well, I'll give you a piece of the action and you do the audit for free or whatever. But I'm just wondering if you've heard of anything or anybody that's doing anything along that lines, because obviously we don't want these protocols coming out without an audit, but we also don't want them not to see the light of day. So
that's a tricky one, and it's one we've dealt with. Sometimes we do take stake in the sense that, like, for DAOs, for compound, we do take payment in comp.
Oh, okay.
And we keep some of that on the books. We use some of it to pay for our costs, that sort of thing. And I know there are some audit firms that are kind of getting into like having an insurance claim on top, and things like that. But I think the tricky thing is for bootstrapping projects is if we get too invested, we kind of lose the potential,
makes sense,
the conflict of interest of like we have to sometimes give like a very hard opinion on a project that
do not launch this.
Yeah, basically, like even though maybe we would, and if we take a big stake, we might be financially incentivized, as well as the fact that like it's more financial risk for us that we might want to avoid.
Yeah,
I do think that there are some good programs out there for like there's some kind of community bug bounties you can do that I've seen a lot of projects do. Sometimes either before an audit or just in lieu of an audit if they can't get one. So if they can't get one, then like better that than nothing.
Exactly.
And then what I also try to do is, at least even if I can't get an audit or a third-party assessment, either we do smaller code reviews for clients that are a bit cheaper because we don't spend as much time doing a line-by-line review. It's not as good a guarantee, but it's
still better than nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
And we try to like contribute to like standards that give them kind of the details of what we would check for in an audit. So like there's a group called the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. In fact, they're here in ETHDenver. Their crew is running around, and we've worked with them along with other competitors to write out some specs on like what you should check for in an audit.
Oh, good.
The ETH Trust security specs. So we've got like a version 1 out, and it's not exhaustive. There's always new stuff that comes up, but it's like, here's the obvious stuff. Like, don't use delegate call in like such a way that like you could potentially delegate like your authority to someone that could do anything. Or like, look out for upgrades if you're not like controlling the access control well. A lot of basic stuff that will give projects like a good checklist. And in fact, some of the things, like we divide them into a few different levels. The first level is you can probably get all this stuff found in a static analyzer, like Slither.
Okay.
Basically be like, here, run an analyzer, you can check for all the requirements, and then as you go through, it says, okay, here are the requirements you probably want to get a manual review for, here's like a quality audit you want to get for. So it kind of gets more detailed on the list. So you kind of mature with it. In worst case, you can check it yourself as a team. I think third-party checks are always better.
Sure.
If you can get them, but like you can, start by just seeing if your team agrees if we've met the requirements. And you're just letting an auditor see if you can confirm that.
That's cool, and that'll obviously reduce your cost down the line if you do an audit. So that makes a lot of sense. Are there any? It's hard to recruit Solidity developers, right? And hard to find them and hard to get them. But are you guys finding that the training that's out there now for Solidity devs is incorporating good security practices?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. There's a lot of different programs out there. I mean, I think the one that stands out that I've heard good things about, and I've actually done some talks for, is the Consensus Bootcamp that they do. So that's been good. We've actually had some auditors that come out of that, or
nice.
people. I don't think there's like a big focus on security outside of the obvious stuff.
Right.
I mean, security in Ethereum is just like its own ball game. That's why we have a 10-week program just to train people who we assume already know the basics of Solidity to then know all the security issues that go into being an auditor and looking for. So I'll say I think that there are programs doing a decent job of it, but honestly, it's a difficult. Like, I wish there was a good security-focused certification program out there that we could recruit from and others could.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're doing a decent job, and I think there are good resources out there. I mean, the fact that like Consensus Diligence, I think who's involved in their boot camp is good.
Right. Your 10-week program, is that just for people that are working at Open Zeppelin, or is that an open thing that people can come attend?
It's an open thing. So basically, it's kind of an aggressive internship program. It's basically like, hey, you want to break into the Web3 industry, become a security professional. Maybe you have some prior security experience in Web 2, or you've been working with Solidity for a while, but you want to basically upgrade. I think we recently just closed a recent round where we had like 400 applicants. We picked the best 3.
Wow.
We do a 10-week training program, and then we give them a work test, the same work test we give for a new hire. And if they pass, then they're on the team.
Nice. So, but other people from outside could take the course.
We don't offer it publicly yet.
Oh, okay.
That's the thing.
Because I'm thinking, you know what? I would rather invest in projects where all the devs, or at least one of the devs, has taken the Open Zeppelin security researcher.
Maybe someday, but the real thing, and this is like the difficulty of scaling these projects, is it's very hands-on. It's our auditors interacting with them,
seeing if they catch things and what they're catching, and that
that's
makes
the trick
sense.
with boot camps. Boot camps are usually pretty good about giving someone the basics, but like unless it's a boot camp where there's like a very good like mentor or instructor to student ratio, it's very difficult to get that hands-on experience to really make sure they get it.
Okay, all right. Well, look, I mean, it just seems obvious that the only way to at least make sure you're more safe is to get an audit.
Yep.
It's
an audit is definitely, I think, at the top of the list, but then like for everything before, everything after, that's the thing we're educating on. We've got like a whole life cycle that we've been trying to push for clients to kind of, and a lot of them understand it, I think, but like trying to like comprehensively say this is what you do at each stage and how you prepare yourself, especially post-audit. Like in audits, we've now been saying, as we audit a project, hey, here's things you should monitor for. Like, you're relying on an oracle, maybe watch that oracle closely. Or this multi-sig has admin control, watch the multi-sig. Make sure you have a good threshold of signers. The signers are custodying their keys well. Like all these areas where we have trust assumptions that we document ahead of an audit. Like we assume these things will work.
Did you do that? Yeah,
because otherwise we'd raise, governance is a bug, or the oracle is a bug. Like most projects, like no, we just assume that would work, but those assumptions can change, and that's a good thing to watch out for and to have a plan for.
That's good. In terms of kind of, my assumption is that simple is always better in Solidity. Do you find the developers are getting better at that over time, or are we still seeing a mess of spaghetti code that is trying to do too much?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I mean, I think the fact that our library's been getting a lot of usage is good because we start with very simple, readable code. Right. I think for other projects, it is getting more complex, both because DeFi is a complex beast, and there's a lot of integrations happening. So not just your code, but like Aave's code or Uniswap's code, or just the expectation people will build on top of your code, and hopefully they build without certain assumptions that could break things. And so that is changing.
Composability is a superpower and also a super villain.
Yeah, and then one other thing we ask projects to monitor for is you're integrating with any protocols that are upgradable. Watch the upgrades because the upgrades can break things. Like there's a few things that are like, I think layer 2s are adding some complexity because now you do have a cross-chain element, even if you're not like doing another L1. If you're purely sticking to Ethereum but you want to roll up, there's still some bridging and some cross-chain exchanging of messages you have to consider, which is another thing you want to monitor. But and then you also have like the advent of ZK technology, which is like its own beast that we're auditing with partner Matter Labs, ZK Sync. So that's been, we have a full team dedicated to that. Just
more complexity.
Yep. And then
it's crazy.
Some things like the diamond pattern, which is getting a lot of traction. We don't support it in our library.
What is that?
So it's a new way to do upgrades.
Interesting.
So the proxy pattern?
Sure.
Yeah, so the basic thing, like, entry point contract implementation, like logic is here, you can swap out the logic contract. Diamond is kind of like a different way to do that, but you can have multiple different, you can have different contracts for different pieces of logic of your contract. And that's kind of, there's a lot more detail that goes into it, but that's a simple version. And you could the nice thing is that you could have like a really big contract that everyone interacts with through that proxy. And then you have like your logic spread out amongst multiple contracts. So you get around the size limit.
Oh, okay.
But it is a bit more complex. I would say it's like the advanced user thing of like, be careful if you're using this, you better know what you're doing. We've done a few audits on that. So I usually recommend transparent proxy as like the default, and even then, keep that upgrade power protected.
Right.
We have debates with the consensus diligence team on whether upgradability is a bug or not on occasion, and we're like, we're not upgrade maximalists, we're pragmatists.
That's good.
It's good for patching bugs, for example, but make sure whoever's patching it is protecting the keys. You have a good multi-sig or a DAO, and maybe even a time lock if you want to give people heads up.
Yeah, so people know it's coming. Are you seeing more and more people, more and more projects that are? There's not very many right now. I think you can count on one hand the number of projects that are radically decentralized, like a Liquidity, where you release it and there's no upgrade path. Are you seeing more of that coming in, or not so much?
I'm seeing a lot of intention to do so.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of projects that are making meaningful strides toward it. It depends on the project. I think everyone has a trade-off on whether that makes sense. Some projects are we're going to reach an end state where we feel like we're feature complete, everything's mature, we're confident there's no bugs we'll have to patch. We'll just burn the upgrade roll and go our way. And then some projects are we'll always have upgradability, but we'll maybe decentralize that through a DAO or something, or a time lock, and kind of restrict that power so there's less concern about it being misused.
Right.
So generally, yes. We talked to clients like Matter Labs about how they'll decentralize the rollup over time.
Okay.
That's a big focus for them in the long term. And then clients like Compound that kind of have decentralized, but now they're figuring out, okay, how do we manage this effectively? How do we still make sure when we go through a 7-day process, which is pretty good, there's still a decent amount of QA happening there, so that once you approve an upgrade, nothing bad happens.
Yeah. Typically, with a full audit, what's the time frame from start to finish for one of those?
So let's say,
obviously, the variety of contracts and everything else out there.
Oh yeah.
So let's take if you were auditing, I don't know, the original sushi swap.
Oh, original sushi swap. So clone of Uniswap.
Right.
I can't remember the line count on my top of my head. Let's say 2,000 lines of code. Let's say we have a backlog of 3 months. We have that conversation 3 months ahead of time. Sometimes we get them in sooner. It just kind of depends if there's where the holes are in the schedule.
Sure.
We sit down, we say, hey, what's the code? Let's estimate it. Maybe they expect some lines to be added. We kind of bake that into the estimation. We might say, for example, roughly 4 weeks, let's say.
Okay.
2 auditors. If it's really complex, maybe 3 auditors to make sure there's a little extra double checking. And then we'll book that time. And then when we start the audit, we're like, okay, give us your snapshot of the code, freeze it, and we're going to look at this exact version. No touching.
Don't touch it again.
Yeah,
no more upgrades.
Yeah.
Stop messing with the code. Take a break.
Yeah, which can sometimes be difficult, which is why we were make sure you're frozen, you're feature complete by then.
Right.
And little changes happen here and there. We'll work with clients on, but the main thing is it doesn't change the major components. And then we go through it line by line. Our big process is 2 eyes are on every line of code, so there's a little peer review and double checking. And then near the end of that process, we issue them a report. Sometimes if we see a big bug, we'll also give them that heads up as we find it. If it's a big change that they're probably going to have to plan for. Otherwise, all the findings get collected in a report. We send it to them privately, and then we work through a fix review process, which usually takes another week or 2, depending on the extent.
Right.
They give us all their
changes. Do you
changes.
end up advising the changes to be made?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll usually raise an issue, and then we'll say, these are ways we'd recommend addressing it.
Cool.
And we work through the client. Sometimes the client says, maybe we fix it a different way that doesn't entirely address our concern, but it does get there. And sometimes they'd say, it's expected behavior. We're not going to worry about that.
Okay.
And sometimes it's fair. It's it's integration issues, for example. We're if someone integrated with your protocol, this could become a security issue. And they're we'll document it and say, don't do that.
Yeah.
So sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. We usually just, it's the client's project. So as long as we document it and publicize our opinion, their opinion, people know about it. That's the important thing.
Sure. So the moment that, first let me ask you this. Do you guys also provide war room services, post exploits and hacks for projects?
Ooh, so that's an area we don't actively provide that as a service, but we do reach out to clients that have been involved with audits in the past. One, we want to see, is there an issue that came up in an audit that we missed and we want to know about it? And obviously we just want to get ahead of that. We want to work with the team. We want to look like good actors, not people that just said, well, I got an audit, it's not a guarantee. And it isn't.
Right.
We do want to be a good actor there.
Right.
And luckily, we've never seen a critical issue in production from an audit where it wasn't something we raised. Sometimes we'll have an audit with someone and the conclusion is, get another audit, please. And then they don't and something happens. But we've never had an issue where a client, took our recommendations and then something bad did happen.
That's cool.
Although we've had a few close calls and we've had to, catch something in another way. But in general, it's gone well. And we do sometimes do that war room service for clients ad hoc, really where we see it fit. But we are planning, what we really want to do is build war rooms for clients, which is actually what we're using DeFender for. We're saying, hey, because we don't want to be the one, having to make decisions for clients, it doesn't feel decentralized if we're that much of a point of failure. Like if, you know, our guys aren't on call over the weekend and then suddenly something's happening, like we want a team to have the ability to respond confidently themselves.
Sure.
So we're actually building out a new incident response training process for a lot of clients. And our tooling does a lot of things like the monitoring to see something's going wrong. And then you can even automate the incident response process. So if you have the ability to, like, let's say, pause a marketplace that might have an issue, you could actually automate that. If you have a confident monitoring metric that says something's going wrong, you need to pause, we can actually automate that process and fire the transaction immediately.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, if I've done an audit with you, do you guys kind of keep track of the code that I had, or the actions that my code takes, my protocol takes, so that if something else pops up 6 months later that is an exploit of another contract, or you guys discover something potentially could be an exploit that wasn't known as an exploit at that time? I don't even know if that makes sense, but, you know, are you going to call me up and say, yo, Brad, we've just discovered something new and you need to change this?
Yes. So a good example of that would be like MEV.
Okay.
Like when MEV came on the scene, or flash loans, like as an attack vector, like that was something that we, you know, along with everyone, immediately had to learn, like, oh man, this is like a new nuclear bomb in the toolkit of people that want to exploit DeFi protocols. We've got to, you know, we figured out that practice very early on and started applying it to our audits. But we did have clients in the past that were like, well, they might be vulnerable as well.
I gotcha.
So we don't provide it as a service, but when we see it and we notice, hey, this is going to apply to a prior client, we do try to reach out and say, hey, this could be an issue for you as well.
Good.
So it isn't something I would say, like, I would want a client to depend on us for.
Right.
I would want them to stay up to date. But like, yeah, if we see something we know another client's affected, we will definitely reach out and be like, yeah, we think this is something you need to address.
Is there a place that, or a site or a researcher that's collecting like all the potential exploit vectors, and that's something that people can go check on or see if, hey, I have this, or, oh, you know what, I've got all this in my code, so I'll checkbox against that and I'll get an alert that something new has been found?
That would be nice. People keep talking about it. And we do have, I mean, like, the ETH Trust spec is kind of like a very generic version of that, but it's not like a monitoring or like really up to date on security vulnerabilities. And there's like an SWC directory that Consensus Diligence actually put together a few years back, but from what I can tell, it hasn't been regularly updated in the last couple of years. So honestly, there's not a good up-to-date resource for that. I'd love for someone to have that.
Seems to me it'd be phenomenal.
Yeah. And we do actually have some bots that we'll build on Vorta, which is a decentralized monitoring network we've incubated as a project, but it's independent of us.
Okay.
And there are bots on there that will like look for vulnerabilities. It's like, hey, you know, if this becomes a known vulnerability in a contract that a lot of people use, it can actually like find that and notify people of it.
Oh, nice. Very
so
nice.
One thing is you do have to get people to subscribe to it and know about it.
Sure.
And you also want to be sensitive to, you don't want to scream vulnerability right here, look, to everyone.
Yeah. So, okay, yeah, no.
Yeah. So there's a careful way we have to go about it. But I think there's like the tools are there. I think it's just getting a lot of people together to like start to curate those resources. And
that's cool.
We try to do that internally for ourselves, but it's like a bigger lift to try to get that as a public-facing thing. So
sure.
I'd say it's something we've discussed and something we might do in the far future, possibly collaborating with other people in the ecosystem. But I think you're right; it's definitely a need.
Yeah, makes sense. So tomorrow you're speaking. What are you going to be talking about tomorrow?
So that's going to be a fun one. That's going to be decentralizing access control.
Okay.
And it's kind of related to what we've been discussing about, like, you know, how DAOs need to be careful about like what goes on and how people are going to use them, but there's this like trade-off we always seem to be encountering with a lot of these DeFi protocols, which is like, well, we want to be decentralized. We don't want like a few people to be able to make arbitrary decisions without like any like heads up on the community or anything like that. So people usually start out with like, hey, an EOA or a small multi-sig, and they slowly want to move to, we have a DAO, or maybe we're entirely immutable.
Right.
But once you get to that DAO stage, and this is something we've experienced with Compound, you now have your hands tied. You're like, every decision, even the small things,
has to go through that. Yeah.
7-day process. And like, we've had issues on Compound before. Before we started our partnership with them, they had a big bug, Proposal 62, that caused over $100 million of comp to accidentally be issued. And it took 7 days to patch it because you have to go back through the governance process to do another upgrade to reverse it. And we had a similar issue this past year that luckily didn't cause any loss of funds, but it was like a temporary suspension of one of the markets that had to be fixed. Same thing. Had to wait 7 days with, chewing our nails, hoping to go through. So what we've been trying to push with more clients is let's build more granular access control, and to basically say, like, well, have a DAO be your admin, your super operator, the king of the DeFi protocol. but let's create more granular roles for people to do the pausing or set certain parameters, whether it's like, for example, Gauntlet will set financial risk parameters for compound and other lending markets.
Right.
They have to go through a 7-day vote for compound every time. It'd be nice if maybe that was like a 1-day review where they just submit something, and if no one contests it, it just goes through.
Right.
Because they're already being paid for the service and they hardly ever get opposed. And
right.
And if someone says, I want to oppose it, maybe you just put it to a vote then. But the default
that makes sense.
Yeah, just make it easy. And then for pausing, you want to do that quickly, rapidly, sometimes even automate it.
You don't want to waste 7 days.
Yeah, but like for Defender, we do the key management for a relayer that would send the transaction. But sometimes people are sensitive to that. Like, well, I don't want a single key having that much power. But let's say you have a DAO that controls the delegation of that power, and it delegates it to a key to only pause that market and nothing else. And at any point, if you're worried about AWS going rogue, who manages the keys, or anyone else, you just revoke the power, and you can always reverse it if they do something bad and something like that. So
right.
you think carefully about what powers you delegate to, like an EOA or a fast-acting multi-sig, but you keep all the power kind of reserved to the DAO to pick and choose as it sees fit. So now maybe you just do one DAO proposal to say, give this person the power for incident response, and now they can move rapidly to respond to things without having centralized the protocol as a result.
That's awesome. That's really cool. All right, very cool, very cool. If I was a JavaScript developer, and this sounded fascinating, working in security in Open Zeppelin or another audit firm, what would be your advised path of advancing skills and knowledge till you get to the point that you could take the 10 weeks course with you guys?
So, JavaScript developers a good start because you're going to do a lot of scripting in Web3 for calling your smart contracts and testing it and things like that. It's really going to be now learning Solidity. So,
right.
There's a lot of good resources out there, and I think some people just find the right fit. I think, so assuming you find like a good starter for Solidity, just get your basics in. I do recommend people check out 2 things. One is Ethernauts, which is a capture the flag system, so you can learn the basic Solidity bugs.
Right.
And then another would be kind of just going on a contract wizard. Have you used a contract wizard?
I've played with it trying to set up a DAO in conjunction with the guys at Tally.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was talking to the guys at Cawley last week. We're actually trying to make sure. Yeah, we're trying to make sure that people set the right parameters in the governor.
Well, I sent him some messages when I went through the process. I was like, look, non-developer. I understand developing. I understand the tech behind it. I can tell a developer what's possible, but I can't give them the code. And so when I was talking to name blank on the founder, one of the founders of Dennison, thank you very much. I've interviewed him, so that's embarrassing. I walked him through some issues I ran into with conceptual understanding of what was being asked of me. Yeah. So anyway, but go ahead.
But no, let's just say he's been forwarding those concerns to us, and we're thinking of ways to do it because it's not like an ERC20 where you copy paste and it's like name, symbol, whatever.
Right.
It's like there's a little bit more that goes into it. Like
exactly.
What you want the form to be, this sort of thing. So, but for developers, like I think just playing with those contracts, like first deploy them through remakes, poke them, play around with them, see what happens, and then look through the specs, like understand ERC20 under the hood,
right?
And ERC 721 and a few others, and that's like a great starting point just to get familiar with primitives, and then maybe play with Uniswap or Aave, program some stuff in that. And in fact, you could also like use Defender and just program some auto tasks and like say, let me play around with some stuff on testnet and see what happens. So
nice.
I think just getting in there, getting your hands dirty, and then maybe doing a few small projects that you publish and have on your GitHub, and then when you go to the fellowship program, you're like, yeah, I'm new to this, but I've shown that I can do the basics, I can learn, and that's the big thing. You gotta learn quickly in the industry. Even once you get the speed today, tomorrow something new will happen.
Right.
So
absolutely.
That's like the big skill to learn and just have the basics down, and then from there, we try to take it forward. Essentially.
Very cool. Very cool. Anything else we should know about you or Open Zeppelin or anything that's going on?
We have a bounty program at ETHDenver, so we're always trying to get people to use Defender and play around with stuff.
Cool.
And I know we hadn't talked about it yet, but we're excited about account abstraction.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so we just completed an audit with the Ethereum Foundation for the rollout they did for the new smart contract.
Nice.
I know CoinDesk has some coverage yesterday.
I just saw an article, and I've only read the headline, so I have no idea. And I'm like, wait a minute, this headline says can recover private keys they've lost.
Yes.
And I was like, wait. But I haven't had time to read it.
Yeah, so the short account abstraction is kind of an interesting, complex thing. There's a lot of history to it on Ethereum. There's we want to do it natively, and then people didn't want to have to fork and do a lot of changes. So this particular version, EIP 437, It's intended to be a way for us to support account abstraction without changing Ethereum's protocol.
Okay.
And it's it's an alternate mempool. It's a way to say, hey, if you want
interesting.
To add these smart contract capabilities to your account without using an EOA, because the problem with EOA is you lose your key, you're done. There's no real protection into it. With account abstraction, you have the ability to add protections on top, recovery mechanism. If you lose your key, someone else, 3 of your friends,
you trust somebody else to.
Yeah, they can recover it for you, and then you don't have to a good example is if your key's compromised and you happen to have a lot of accounts on Aave or all these tokens, you suddenly got to migrate all of that.
Right.
While in the middle of hopefully not someone else trying to do it at the same time.
Exactly.
So the account abstraction, you could actually from the protocol's perspective, the DeFi and tokens, all they see is your account.
Right.
And if your account, the access to your account changes, where you say, I have to move it to a new key, from the DeFi protocol's perspective, nothing changed. And so instead of having to do this, you have to go through every contract to migrate,
right?
It's all just in one account.
Wow.
That you can move to anywhere. And
that's fantastic.
You can do things like pay for users' gas transactions. So it's meta transactions, but I would say better support across the board. Along with a lot of other things like multi-sigs. You could do what Gnosis Safe does, but in the account. So the account could be controlled by multiple signers, for example.
Wow.
So lots of fun things. It does require wallets to offer that support, to offer it for
Sure, have it built in, yeah.
Yeah, and the entry point contract, which we audited, is a big point of failure that we have to be careful about.
I was about to say, it seems like this opens up some vectors, but...
Yeah, it's really just you do, a lot of security research went into making sure that, this complicated ecosystem of someone's paying for the gas, someone's processing the transaction for you, is safe. And from we've done 2 audits on this too so far. So we actually gave them a lot of feedback on there's some things that need to change. They took them in stride. They went back and then we did another audit to make sure we're good to go.
Nice.
But yeah, the paymaster is or not the paymaster. The entry point contract's the one that dropped recently that everyone's oh, it's live, and that's the thing that is the point of trust. You need to make sure that smart contract doesn't have any bugs, because that is where things could go wrong. But that's why that's why they came to us for an audit to make sure that it's good to go.
Very nice. So that's out now, can be utilized now.
So the entry point contract is live. It can be used
if wallets are supporting it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And from what I've heard, there are several wallets that are planning to roll out support for it.
Nice.
And the cool thing is that we're also seeing L2s compete on this. I think that's part of the reason it's been pushed is CK Sync supports native account abstraction. A lot of others. And Stark, because they're we can start from
Pressure's
scratch.
on. Phantom's doing something with account abstraction as well. Yeah, I can see that.
So the race is on.
That's cool. That's very cool, man. I love that. All right. Anything else going on with Open Zeppelin we need to know about?
We're growing, we're hiring, and we're looking to do more. Basically, that partnership deal with that we have with Matter Labs and Compound and Sandbox we're looking for more projects like that. Basically,
very cool.
We want kind of our end-to-end security covered. We want to know how to do it safely. We want the pre-deployment, the audit, and the post-deployment kind of process laid out. So we've been trying to do that more comprehensively with clients.
Nice.
And as a result, we want to learn from those clients and build kind of toolkits and templates that we can then offer. In fact, we actually built a template kit for this hackathon.
Really?
Monitor your multisig or monitor your DAO.
Nice.
Some stuff we built from Compound and made it generic for any DAO, ROC governor.
So very cool.
We're trying to learn from our best projects, our best clients, and then turn what we learn into things that the rest of the ecosystem can use without having to pay us lots of money and work with us directly, because we can't. There's only so many of us.
Yeah, of course.
So we're hoping to learn from the best projects in the space to build things everyone else can use and build on top of.
That's awesome. That's fantastic, man. Well, I appreciate. What's the website for Open Zeppelin?
www.openzeppelin.com.
Okay, yep. Perfect, easy enough. And I will put Twitter handles and web addresses in the show notes. Appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks. It was very educational and learned a lot, and it's cool to hear what you guys are up to.
Awesome. It was glad to be on.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Joe, you want to shake his hand?
Oh, yeah, sure. No, I mean, it's kind of I'm sort of show up when the product's going. I'm not in the background with the building and stuff like that. So I'm wow, this is very interesting.
Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll post this one up later on today, but we'll talk to you guys soon.